Yo! Welcome back to Casting Commons, the show where we talk and discuss all things Pauper. I am your host, Teasdale, and this is my co-host, the words of wisdom himself, Reese.
Hello.
What? It's fitting.
Yeah.
Before we start, please do not forget to hit that like, subscribe, and follow button so you never miss an upload. It also helps the algorithm and really helps with exposure. It is a great way to support us for absolutely nothing. So that is also my shilling for today. And what have you been up to?
So I've been pretty busy this week, to be honest. I'm fitting a new bathroom in my house.
Woo!
So that is basically taking up 90% of my free time. I did manage to sneak away on Sunday and play in our local Legacy event, which was sweet. With Black Red Reanimator, which is one of my all-time favorite decks. I ended up playing against Burn, Blue Black Shadow, Belcher, Turbo, Muxus, and Elves, which are all just like pretty easy matchups for Reanimator. Bar Belcher, which is essentially whoever wins the die roll should probably just win. I lost the die roll, but Michael then just mulliganed to Oblivion game one, so I sort of got a freebie there. But yeah, it was fun. Legacy seems really good right now alongside Pauper. The only issue, I think, it's really got his Bowmasters. Like, he's just better than everything else, as we tend to say. The Lord of the Rings and the external product cards are usually just above everything else. And Legacy's no real exception, with Bowmasters just being like, people are just putting in every deck.
Yeah,
like those Reanimator lists that are just 4 Bowmasters in this Reanimator deck. I'm just like, why is this a thing?
Card's too good.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And that was all I did for playing Magic. Outside of playing, the other sort of Magic stuff I've had interest in, there was just previewed Ricardo Cavallo Secret Lair, which is pretty sweet for someone who likes Cavallo's art. If you've never seen it before, if you don't like it, you probably don't get it. But it's someone who I've followed since I was at uni, studying fine art. So it's sweet to see his art on Magic cards. And 2 of them are like pretty solid Pauper cards as well, which is nice, with Inspiring Overseer and Consider.
Sweet.
What about yourself?
Magic-wise, I have tested, again, as I seem to do every week in, week out. I tried Luffy's list on Jeskai Affinity, which was pretty sweet. I'm pretty happy with that main deck, to be fair, and I think Luffy's list is pretty strong. It effectively is like Glinthawk Experimental Synthesizer with Thraben and no Ardent Recruits, and also runs Ornithopter. So it's just like kind of challengey, Pauper-Geddon-y, more than like Walkers or Blue-White Splash and Galv Blast and things. I think the deck's just strong. It's a bit slower because you get the Glinthawk and Synth, but it's also faster because you've got Ornithopter than like the Ardent Recruit lists. And yeah, I didn't feel like I missed anything, to be fair. I didn't miss Ardent Recruit, really. I enjoyed having the reach of Synth and having Glinthawk and things like that. It really helped grind without all that glitters too, which was quite nice.
I'm assuming the Ornithopters means it's got Springleaf Drums in as
well.
Yeah, it's sweet. I do like that package. It's really good. It does give you a lot of speed advantage over the other versions.
And it was honestly, it was really, really solid. It's just the biggest issue with the deck is sideboarding. It's probably, to me personally, it's like, the sideboard in general. There's like 15 different ways to build the sideboard and how you want to tackle it. And B, it's how to sideboard is so messed up. Like, I've came to the conclusion, after I tried Luffy's actual list, which I did pretty well with. I think I 4-1'd or 3-2'd. I then changed the sideboard to what I think I wanted to fight. But I went with the rule of pretty much 3 of is the maximum going for any card. And after that, it's a 2 of. So I just ran like 2 relics, 2 envelops, 2 this, 2 that, and just went right through. Like, I am running nothing more than 2 ofs. And it's just I then can't overboard. I can't change the deck too much because the deck is so like you take 4 cards out and put 4 cards in. You're like, all right, okay, I've just messed my deck up because these 4 cards are okay sometimes.
Yeah, I think that there's obviously like the flex slots and the weak slots that you can take out, but there's a lot of it that if you start taking pieces out, it does just fall apart.
Yeah, like I'm all for like say Galv Blast bad. Like that's not too like to be fair. When you have to remove Galv Blast, it's a doddle. Like you
Yeah.
have so much
Yeah,
free
well, that's
space.
one of those cards, really.
But
If it's not good, it's an easy takeout.
But as soon as it's like reasonable, you're into like, okay, I'll trim here, trim there, and then the next thing you realize, you've probably got like 1 Ornithopter and 3 Frogmites, and your deck's just a pile of shit.
Your
Effectively,
Springleaf drums don't work
yeah,
anymore.
it's just like the deck is just mental. But then you've also got like I didn't have End the Festivities, I didn't have Red Elemental Blast. I basically was a mono white sideboard with 2 envelops in. I think is how it ended up, and it was like it worked. Like I really enjoyed the envelope, which is not something that a lot of decks aren't running, which I think's fine. But I don't after Dust to Dust, the sideboard here, I don't think you care about. Like Cast into the Fire, Deglammer, Revoke Existence. I actually don't think you give a crap about. Hitting 1 artifact just isn't good enough. To be fair, hitting 2 isn't that good. It's once you see 2 Dust to Dust, like that's when it's like really bad. And I think that's where the envelopes really helped. But yeah, I ended up going 4-1 with that list, and I only lost to Gardens, which then kind of shot my logic of only 2 obs to hell, and I was like, maybe I need 4 Obsidian Acolytes, because, yeah. But I also didn't board in envelopes either, which I also think are pretty good there, because basically the only reason I lost was because of Drowning Sorrow, because they just can't keep up with how many creatures you can put on. It's like to 1-1 removal it, and like Drown kind of picks them back up. So that's one matchup that I definitely need to figure out because it is a tough one. But ultimately, I
guess that's maybe where like the little squire guy, I forgot what his name is, the 1 mana 3/3 would maybe shine as well, because it just like it means your Marine Forces and those guys all survive the drowns rather than just the Marine Forces.
Yeah, definitely. And it is like you do get a lot of like trade-offs for just random card choices, which is good and all that sort of stuff. It's just figuring out that sideboard really that I'm struggling with. Like maybe even like Walker had and having 4 Ardent Recruits in the sideboard is where it goes. But yeah, I'm ultimately unsure on the sideboard, but the deck is very strong for sure. But I also keep seeing cool decks that look well positioned. I'm like, should I try this out again? It's like Mogwarts looks good. It obviously, I think, gets better, obviously, as we touch on spoilers further down. And then also there's like Blue-Black Control, which looks good. And then I've also sort of brewed that as well. So I also want to try that, but Murders isn't out yet, whatever it's called. So I just keep brewing on piles and think, oh, this actually looks really good. Is it more my thing than Jeskai Glitters? Because I do enjoy playing it. I really do enjoy playing Jeskai Glitters, even though it's not my usual type of deck.
Yeah.
But I do dread playing it in paper. I can't be bothered counting all day. Not gonna lie, is
how many games do we lose to miscounts?
About 75 million. Like I lose to miscounts now when I try to count how much damage I have by untapping and putting the glitters on while on Magic Online. So I wouldn't like to think how much I do it even more in paper. So Magic Online makes you lazy, but it's easy. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Anything else you want to add?
No, that's it from me.
So moving on to some news. So first of all, tournament news. The Northern Pauper Open is happening on the 18th of February this year. Well, this month by the time this probably comes out.
This year.
18th this year, 2024. The event is in Leeds with a cap of 64 players. There are only 5 tickets remaining. So if you are considering going, please buy your tickets now because, it's going to sell out. And, big things are happening. Both of us will be in attendance, of course. Rep and casting comments. And we have an exclusive. So the exclusive we have heard, and it is official. There you go. Callie or Sadin Rakin or Jacob or Callie, whatever you officially know him with, is officially coming to the Northern Pauper Open. He's officially booked his flights this morning and told me we get the exclusive here. So
What's your plan?
Well, you could probably, to be fair, you could probably take a guess. It's one of 4 decks, to be honest. Most
That's
likely.
a 1 in 4.
Well, the 4 decks he writes on Patreon. So just pay for a Patreon, check out what decks it is, and pick one of them. But he is coincidentally, he's in the country at the time that the event is happening. So he is traveling all the way up, I believe. I don't actually know where he's staying, but I think he's traveling up. I think a good 5 hours. So he's committed to the Northern Pauper. You can tell it's the American life where they don't even bat an eyelid at driving 5 hours, and we would consider 2 hours. It's a bit of a stretch, but anyways. So you have heard it here first. He is the official aspiring Spike of Pauper. I am calling it, and he's come to the Northern Pauper Open. So there you go. Sad news. On to the next one. The Pauper 2Ks at Binghamton, New York, held the Dragon Master Games on the 24th of February, and there is also one on April the 6th. There's a guaranteed prize pool of 2K to the top 8 and goes to top 16 if they receive 50 or more players. There is a 100 player cap, so if you do want to go, please look at the description below, and all the ticket information is there. But unfortunately, due to Callie coming to the Northern Pauper Open, it now means he's in this country for the Pauper 2K, so he will unfortunately not be there.
He can go to the one in April if you want.
Yeah, exactly. Buried. And there has also been a surge of UK events recently posted about on Twitter and things like that. We're not going to read them all out, otherwise that would be literally the podcast. So follow Pauper Dan on Twitter. He retweets all sorts of UK events. And if you don't want to get spammed with UK events, just press unfollow as well. That also works.
There is actually quite a lot popping up now compared to recent years. There's definitely a surge of Pauper at the moment, which is sweet to see.
Because Pauper's best format. Yeah. And moving on to some news. Actual news. The spoiler for the whole set of Murders at Karlov Manor. That is the correct way to say it, because it's not the other things that it definitely should be.
It's the Ravnica one, not the Innistrad one.
Definitely should have been anything else but that. There is infinitely ways you could have named this set and it been a bit more interesting. But anyways, so the full set is out. You can obviously check the full set list or whatever on Scryfall or whatever. I also have my set review. My set review is live if you want to check that out on Cards Realms. I write a load of shit about some cool cards and say what I think they're going to probably see play, but probably won't, because, I'm the hype man. But we have got 5 cards here to highlight, which we think may see play, could see play in certain decks and all that sort of good stuff. And obviously our number 1 winner, which, to be fair, is reasonably obvious, I would say. So I'll start, I guess.
Yeah, go for it.
So my first one is Reasonable Doubt. So this is a Quench, which is 1 in a blue, counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. And then you may suspect up to 1 creature. And suspect is a new mechanic that basically says that creature can't block but has menace. So effectively, the idea that I'm thinking on this is, so there's potentially Terror decks or Fairy decks or whatever where they have weirdy flex slots of Spell Pierce, Force Spike, Lose Focus. I have a feeling that this may take up that spot due to the fact that obviously the suspect side of things, you can help you get your ninjas through, you can help get your fairies through, you can help get your terrors through, giving it menace, and worst case scenario, you can make that 1 creature or whatever not block in some Magical Christmas Land situations. It also is up to 1, so you do not have to have a creature target to counter something, but obviously you do have to have something to counter to suspect it.
Yeah.
So it's not instant replacing counterspell in mono blue terror. This is definitely not what's happening. Nowhere short. But the card is definitely interesting enough to test, and I believe it was Stompy's number 1 pick out of the top 5, which is pretty interesting. Since the guy plays a lot of terror. So
the gold number 1 pick.
Yeah.
not as high on it as that.
which is fair. I can
I think
understand that.
for me, there's so many quenches that are just
Yeah.
not playable,
Oh, for
and the
sure.
fact like Menace firstly isn't unblockable, and you have to be able to counter a spell and have a guy in play that you want to attack with, and for the Menace to actually matter, and for them not to be able to now just pay 2 because you've had to wait 3 turns till you can play a guy before your counter spell works.
I do think that is
It's
the
sort of just
case,
too many
but
things to line up for me.
but for me, you do in Terra in particular. Obviously, you do end up playing that sort of Delver-esque strategy of play Terra, protect it,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I do think Snuff Out seems to be quite heavily presented, or those sort of cheap I'm going to play this removal spell kind of happens a lot. So you're also taxing them with the ward, and then you're taxing them with this, that it seems like it's good or better for longer. In the same sense of spell pace, obviously it's 1 extra mana and an extra turn, but I think it's got something there, and I don't know. I say it. None of the I personally don't think any of these cards are going to be breaking any formats,
No.
but it's definitely another one on the list where usually Spell Pierce or Lose Focus sort of wins out on that slot. But
I think the fact lose focus can just scale as well, so it's just good for basically the entire game.
oh, for
Makes it a
sure,
lot stronger than this
for
card.
sure.
And then if the player lose focus, it's usually only like 1.
Oh yeah. Like
And
I
then
was
I
saying,
can't.
that's
Yeah,
that's
it's an interesting tool, but yeah, I definitely wouldn't have had it at number 1.
that's sort of where I'm at with this. I could see it as like a 1 to 2 of that kind of is there for these decks are all Brainstorm, Lorien Reveal decks anyways. So if it's not the matchup for it, it's easily brainstormable away. Same as Spell Pierce and same as Lose Focus to an extent, obviously Force Spike as well. And I just think these sort of cards, I think this obviously isn't Spell Stutter, the not Spell Stutter Sprite, the actual Spell Stutter, the counter spell, which obviously a lot of people were high on, and it's the same thing of I think this does a bit more than those other quench effects because there is times where making them double block or even making them double block is usually trading a terror or something you don't want to unblock with. Like if it may not be unblockable, but if you hit him with 2 to 3 terrors or whatever, like it gets in there. So I just
Yeah, it's definitely more than most of the options, but
yeah
I don't think it's better than lose focus, and lose focus doesn't really see that much play in
yeah,
Terra.
but
So it's a hard one to fit in. Like it's definitely not better than Spell Pierce because Spell Pierce is so efficient. I guess like if you want to damage the early game, because like Force Spike's not very good after turn 1 essentially. If you're less fussed about your turn 1 being worse, it might fit in that slot.
yeah.
But yeah, it's nice to have more tools like this, and there's plenty of knobs on these quench cards that they just keep turning in different ways, and eventually one of them will probably be very good in Pauper.
Yeah, for sure.
But
As I
it's
say, it's
weird that we haven't really had one that's been very good yet. Like Lose Focus is the closest, and it's like
yeah,
I guess Blue Red plays it a lot more, but in Mono Blue Terror, it's like a fringe 1 of 2 of here and there.
yeah. I think to me, Loose Focus was the main shine of it has always been the fact that you can out counter wars and also works against Cascade. Like is
And it's just never dead. Like it's a quench that doesn't die off late game.
yeah, like being able to replicate is great, but obviously it's why it works. But I do also think that it comes a lot of people do just I've got this lose focus. I'm going to lose focus for so much more, and it does interact obviously, but it also I don't know. I think it fought. Obviously, not compared to this card, but it does fall down a lot where people just hold on to it for dear life and say, "I will counter the perfect card," or wait for its on the side. And it's like you've just literally just went all out, and now you're gonna die to something else. But again, these quench cards kind of do, I'd say, fall off late game. But at least you can, at least with this, you can counter something if they don't want to pay for it. Like it doesn't matter, but you can still at least give something menace. Like it doesn't have to counter it. It can still just be, I will counter your brainstorm, pay 2 more for it. My guy's now got menace. It's now that little bit more threatening. So even though it is dead in this counter side of things, at least being some sort of combat trick is not dead, which might matter. So definitely an interesting one.
Yeah, it is. Ultimately, it is. I think again, if it was modal, or if you could choose both modes, like if it was quench plus you suspect something, or you can just cast it for 2 to suspect
Mm.
something, I think that would give it a bit more legs as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the how awkward it is to line up.
Mm.
Like late game, you draw it, it's not going to counter something, but then you're just going to have to leave the 2 mana up to fire it off as a counter anyway to try and give your guy menace.
Mm.
Yeah. It, interesting.
Do you want to go into your next one?
Yeah, my I think for all these cards, I'm just not very high on any of them. But
Mm.
my first pick was Demand Answers, which is 1 red for an instant. As an additional cost to cast, you discard a card or sack an artifact, and draw 2 cards. So it's like a sort of Deadly Dispute, Reckoner's Bargain sort of type card, like fits in that same zone.
Mm.
Obviously, not as good as Deadly Dispute because it doesn't give you mana back.
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't really go in the same decks. Like Grixis Affinity, for example, is not going to want this because the
No.
discarded card is just not relevant to it at all. Um, but I think the places where I think this could be interesting is in the decks that can utilize both options, being the discard and
Mm.
or the sacrifice. So something like Red Black Madness or Red Black Sack,
Mm.
you can enable your Fiery Tempers or you can sack your Ica Wellsprings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where this might be more interesting than Deadly Dispute, just basically having that discard be relevant. The other one I put it down for was Mogwarts, because
Mm.
a lot of the time when you combo off with Mogwarts, you can't cast more Deadly Disputes because you're really tight on black mana.
Mm-hmm.
You'll maybe only have enough black to cast your Persist Goblin, and then you've got infinite red, but if you've got 3 Deadly Disputes in your hand, you can't cast any of them.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
might be one where you can have it in Mogwart. It works while you're comboing off to chain through your deck if you don't have the Wincon in hand. And then lastly, I've seen like a few people mention it in Kuldotha. Currently, I'm not even sure Kuldotha wants any draw twos. Like the impulses have essentially went
Mm.
from 4 to 8 in the deck too. Sometimes there's 1 or 2. A lot of times they don't play any. But I could also see if they print another card similar to Goblin Blast Runner. So like a aggressive creature that's enabled by sacking something. This might be an option as an enabler.
Mm.
Over the impulses if you wanted the impulses in.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page. Like, I think this card is for, I'd say, non-black decks or decks that aren't really black. Like as you
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
where I do agree with Mogwarts, which is quite nice, but I think the only other place I can see it is something like Mono Red Tron as well. A deck that has quite a
yeah.
lot of artifacts. It gets flooded a lot in the late game. Doesn't really have any draw by like Crimson Fleet Commodore, and that's kind of it. And I do agree
I,
with you on Mono Red as well.
yeah, I guess the Tron thing is quite interesting actually, because obviously the mono red version does miss on that Deadly Dispute engine that like Ultratron has,
Mm-hmm.
where this sort of just adds it in. Like you can have stars or whatever as little cantrips or candy trails, and you can just sack them off to this.
Yeah,
Which yeah is quite sweet.
yeah,
I think as the secret thing for me is the discard being
mm,
relevant. Like if it can work in a madness deck, like maybe red green madness or something like that, it might be interesting if you can like discard root wallers or something to it.
yeah. I think the one big thing that I do agree with is the mono red. To be fair, like it's not a card that mono red wants, and at the moment, if it was to run draw twos, the impulse effects are
Mm.
just so much better. There's so much of a less of a cost. Like sacrificing experimental synthesizer is not really where you're probably like you want to be in that mono red deck to naturally do that. If you're sacrificing it, you want to either be paying the 3 mana to get the guy to get extra damage in and seeing the card, or you want to be sacrificing a cold author
Yeah,
to get goblins, which again is getting more guys.
yeah.
It's not really the card you want to be have, and then you also get to the point where it's less playable if you don't find artifact. You've then got to discard a card and stuff like that. That is one thing that I do like about this card though is there's many decks that are greedy on Deadly Dispute and end up with the Bazillion in their hand. Where
Yeah.
obviously worst case scenario with this, you just discard the extra copy and still get a draw to, but obviously you don't get a treasure or whatever from that. So
Yeah, it's sort of the Gardens dilemma, isn't it? Like I know we've played a lot of Gardens versus various decks, and there's a lot of games where you get stuck with like 2 Deadly Disputes and a Reckoner's Bargain in your hand, and you just can't sack anything.
yeah,
Obviously that's less so now that Tithe and Blade's a thing, but
yeah,
this obviously has that backup out to just cast it whenever you want, really.
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, and Mono Red, like I say, I don't think it wants it now, but I also don't think it's far off. Like if they just reprinted Blast Runner with a different name, I would say this is like fairly close to going in that deck.
Yeah, it is interesting though, because obviously Deadly Dispute can sack a creature, so like in that sort of style of thing, like Blast Runner esque thing, like you're talking about there, it's less relevant. But I do think you that sort of like deck doesn't really want to be just has the ability to just keep sacrificing a bunch of artifacts. Like it has a few, but it's definitely on the low end of artifacts, I feel, and it can definitely struggle that way. And you're open up to the potential of starving yourself of artifacts again, and then you're discarding. And I think that's ultimately the problem with the card I have in mono red is it doesn't run that many artifacts. Plus, you also don't run that many cards that you want to discard, and you run out of hand quite a lot and all that.
Yeah, it'd have to change. Like if they printed another Blast Runner, it's not going to just slot in and then put 4 of this in. Like
Yeah,
it would be a different deck. But it'd just be a different mono red Cult Author deck. You just have to like tweak it so it worked better. But
yeah.
But yeah, the discard, I don't think it's that bad in mono red because a lot of the time, especially now that you don't run as many of the impulses or none, you often end up with like just lands that you don't need. Like you'll have 3 lands in play and 1 in your hand. You just don't need that 4th land.
Yeah.
So you can always pitch it away. But I think it does need something more to make it relevant in mono red. Like I said, another Blast Runner esque card.
For sure.
You
Interesting
want to do
card
your
though.
next one?
Yep. So mine is definitely I'm going out on a limb on this card. For what reason I have no idea why. I can't stop thinking about Broom with this card. So this card is Deduce, which is I've quoted it the new Think Twice, but effectively it is 1 and a blue, draw a card, and then investigate. So effectively, this card is 2 mana, draw a card, make an artifact. Obviously, a clue is pretty okay in terms of artifacts. Obviously, Thraben Inspector and all that sort of stuff. But where I see this card shining is blue-black control as a deck has existed and obviously does exist. It double won the challenge, obviously, 2 weeks ago or whatever, or last week.
Yeah.
And I can see this deck along with like Hard Evidence and Juice. You've now basically got a Deadly Dispute engine because black is the draw spell color.
Yeah.
Blue is not. Blue sucks at drawing cards in comparison nowadays. And this is basically where I'm going. I can just see like a blue-black control deck with this and Deadly Dispute. Don't know. I'm going out on a limb. It might not work.
And Hard Evidence.
And Hard Evidence. So you basically get Hard Evidence, which makes, for those who don't know, it's a 1 blue sorcery, create an 0/3 crab, investigate. So you have an artifact, you have a creature that you can sacrifice, and then you also have your Deduce, which also is draw a card and make a clue. But also, both of your quote-unquote Ica Wellspring Lembas effects are instant and sorceries, which triggers Murmuring Mystic and Tolarian Terror. So that is the idea. I don't know if it's any good, but that's where I'm at with it.
It's an interesting one. I think making the clue relevant is definitely the way to make this
for sure
a useful card. Obviously it's just a cheaper Think Twice, like it costs 1 less to draw the 2 cards. But sort of in a vacuum, that's not really relevant because you could just play like AKs or whatever instead and draw a lot more cards for the same cost. I don't know if Deadly Dispute's the way forward because you just sort of end up on a lot of your cards. So if you've got Hard Evidences and Deduces anyway, do you then need Deadly Disputes to sack you to make your clues into 2 cards for 2 mana and a card, or would you just rather just sack the clue and draw a card?
Who knows?
But yeah, I think if you can make that clue relevant, obviously the spell side is already relevant with Mystic and Terror. And even Hard Evidence, like it gives you even more clues and makes Mystic and Terror better while giving you some early game.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think this is probably secretly the best card out of all of these.
So, like, don't get me wrong. I think there is a potential, and I think the thing that I do like about this is, so say other things that make tokens, like for example, Golgari Gardens makes a plant token, and yeah, obviously you sacrifice that at Deadly Dispute. The thing is, if you don't see your Deadly Dispute, this is still relevant. Like two
Yeah.
mana sack a clue is still fine. Like, imagine if your plant token was sort of relevant. Like it does literal nothing bar I am going to chump block something or I'm going to um, sacrifice a Deadly Dispute. At least
Mm.
you've
I
literally
think,
got clues that draw a card anyways.
yeah, I think the fact that you can then just, play spells that also just leave
Mm.
behind random stuff that
Mm.
you can just pop to draw a card
Mm.
if you don't have the disputes. Yeah, I can see it. I can see it.
This is where I'm at. If you also want to see the list, it is in my new article that I've put together. It might not be good or refined, but that's my idea. That's why I'm going out on a limb on
Yeah,
this card.
I like it. Yeah, I actually think that should have probably been our number one pick.
So there you go.
My second pick is Pick Your Poison,
Mhm.
which I am gonna have to search now because I forgot what it does. It's a 1 green
Green
sorcery,
sorcery.
um, that you choose one. Each opponent sacrifices an artifact, each opponent sacrifices an enchantment, or each opponent sacrifices a creature with flying. The first thing I'm going to say on it is there's already a card called Pick Your Poison, so it's dead hard to find on Google because it immediately comes up with this weird unhinged card or whatever it is.
It's not an unhinged
That
card. It's the
that's
testy cards that they did at
yeah,
that Magic Con thing.
that has the same name.
Yeah.
So yeah, bad name and wizards. That is very poor.
I
Um,
think it's something to do with there were test cards or something like that at the convention. So like there were potentially 2B cards because the same thing happened with Red Heron. But
yeah,
clearly they've put it through design and went, this is the card, and we're like, we'll call it that.
yeah.
Silly.
I can see this being an issue for stores that sell singles that now have two cards that both have the exact same name.
Yep.
But yeah, so there's been quite a lot of hype around this card. It's obviously a very cheap and very versatile green common,
Mm.
which is something that we do need more of in Pauper to make green be able to compete with blue essentially in this sort of new era of Pauper that we're in.
Yeah.
It's probably for me not as format defining as people think it is. I think everyone's just sort of in magical Christmas land of, or your opponent's going to play tap bridge on turn one, and you're just going to tap a green and ponzer it away, which is obviously a very appealing play.
Mm.
But the fact that it's each opponent sacrifices an artifact you don't target is
Mm-hmm.
where it sticks out for me because there's so many just random chaff artifacts knocking around in glitters and in affinity where if they just play a Vault of Whispers and a Blood Fountain, they've now got 3 artifacts. So you play this, they just sack a blood token.
Mm-hmm.
Or in glitters, they can play a Tap Bridge and an Ornithopter.
Mm-hmm.
Or they can play an untapped land and a Thraben Inspector, and then they'll just sack a clue.
Mm-hmm.
I think it scales off. That particular mod scales off very fast
Mm-hmm.
to the point where it's probably the least relevant mod on the card. Which is a weird one given it's the mod that's got the most hype.
Yeah.
But I think for the other mods, it's actually quite a strong green card. That each opponent sacrificing an enchantment is obviously very good because decks play a lot less enchantments than they do artifacts. So you can easily like snipe a glitters. Obviously, you're going to take a hit from it, or a makeshift munitions or something like that. And even the creature with flying, you're going to be able to snipe something reasonable like a flipped Modern Age or Ornithopter with a glitters on or something. But yeah, it's good to see a new green card get a lot of hype in Pauper. I don't think this one really deserves the hype that it has, and I don't think it's going to live up to that hype. But it will probably be a serviceable sideboard card. But probably just not to the extent people want it to be, or maybe even need it to be.
I think the one thing that I do like about this card is obviously I do agree with you that the artifact side is the worst mode in the sense that it doesn't hit what you want it to hit. But the thing that I do like about this is if you board this in against those artifact hate that you want, the other two modes become a lot more relevant anyways. So if you do get the magical Christmas land of Bridge Pass, you do get a pons of them and it feels great. Look,
Yeah.
you've wastelanded them. But then say later on in the game, the glitters, they basically only run one enchantment, so you're hitting the glitters. Say they're Grixis Affinity, they sacrifice each creature with flying, most likely will hit a Kenku land as well. So
I guess a lot of Grixis Affinity's playing Hoverguard
yeah,
now, which makes
less.
it awkward.
It is still obviously they are running less, but it is also it does hit more relevant things, is what I'm trying to say, than just the artifact.
Yeah. I think if it was an instant, I would be like fully on board with the hype train.
I agree.
Like
100%.
I think it would be probably an easy like 10 out of 10 green sideboard card if it was an instant.
Agreed.
But just because it's a sorcery, you're probably not turn one wastelanding them. You're gonna take a hit off whatever the glitters up.
Yeah.
They're gonna be able to sack stuff to the makeshift munitions before you answer it. It sort of makes it a lot worse.
I do agree. I do think getting around there is the reason I do like this is obviously, as I said, the other mods are relevant. And say if you're playing something like mono green stomping, not the best example, but still, it's a mono green deck. It doesn't have any other sideboard card options. It's got Deglammer and Gleeful Sabotage, I think, as like the other two reasonable options. This card's really good at also like dealing with generally like things like you'll have a problem with like Kenku, like Journey, like Makeshift missions, without shuffling the stuff back in, like Deglammer does, which I think's probably like the only place I can see it being really good.
It is the type of card that we want more of. It's like a Dawnbringer Cleric, essentially, for a green deck where all the mods are fine. Like, it's not going to be the best card ever, but it also only takes up one slot. So you get all these mods for one slot. But yeah, I would like them to push sort of this green design a bit more for cards like this, because if this was an instant, like, green would get a lot more ground on being really good at the moment in Pauper.
Yeah, which he definitely needs.
But don't push the blue cards though.
No. And then finally, I guess our number one pick. So our number one pick overall is less exciting, to be fair, which is Novice Inspector, which is the new Thraben Inspector. It is type for type, word for it's word for word Novice Thraben Inspector, but it's a detective instead of a soldier, right?
Or I imagine Thraben Inspector's a human, is it?
Yes. Why is that not a human?
I
think it's a human detective.
All right, okay.
But then I think it's Thraben's a human soldier.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But essentially, it's the same card. It's a 1 white, 1 2.
Basically irrelevant in Pauper.
Yeah. So it's a 1 white, 1 2 that it enters and investigates. So the reason why we put this as the best card is effectively it's Thraben Inspector.
if you want more Thraben Inspectors, you can have them.
You can have them. We think 8's probably too much, most likely. But, 5 to 7, whatever. If your deck wants that, go nuts. It is there. That's it.
Yeah, I think it's also obviously Thraben Inspector's not the easiest card to just pick up loads of now. So if there's new people getting into Pauper, having essentially like a Thraben Inspector reprint would have been fine. If they'd done Murders at Markov Manor, they could have just reprinted Thraben Inspector because it's on theme.
I'll take your word for that one.
But it's Thraben. It's from Innistrad, isn't it?
Sure.
But yeah, it's more availability of cards and has the bonus of if you want 6 Thraben Inspectors in your deck, you can have 6 Thraben Inspectors.
Woo! Well done. You're now not cheating. But yeah, that's basically it. And that is our lovely, exciting top 5. So let us know what you think. Obviously, respond to the tweet, messages on Spotify, I think, and also YouTube. Let me know how you think our top 5. If we've missed the best black card in the set, usually what we've done, something along them lines. Anyways, let's move on to the challenge.
Yeah, Saturday the 27th, 55 players, which is basically what we're seeing standard for Saturday challenges. First place was Grixis Affinity, second place was Boros Gates, third place was Turbo Fog, Fourth place was Kuldotha. Fifth place was Turbo Fog. Sixth place was Kuldotha. And then seventh and eighth were both the Black White Blade with Hopeless Nightmare in that we discussed last week. And then the two near misses, ninth was another Kuldotha, and 10th was Corgate. So a pretty interesting challenge overall. Obviously, the hype from last week is definitely real with double Turbo Fog, double Hopeless Nightmare, Hopeless Blade in the top 8. People clearly liked seeing those decks do well and picked them up. Boros Gates is another deck that we haven't seen in quite a while now. But I guess he's shown that despite the complete absence of Colgate in recent weeks, the Gates package is still very much a contender. And then the only main thing I noticed is that the white decks in the top 8 are super low on Prismatic Strands, which is a card that like previously we've sort of looked to as, oh, this is what keeps white competitive at the moment. It's what Colgate always plays four of. It's what White Weenie always plays four of. But between Boros Gates and the two Black-White Blade decks, I think there's only 4 strands, 2 each in the 2 Blade decks, and that's it. Which is pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, it's a strange one, to be fair. Obviously, it's a weird one because obviously in the theory or the thought of like artifacts are obviously getting bigger in the sense of glitters seems like the deck to beat along with Kuldotha. Like Strands seems like a great option against the white half of glitters and also all the red stuff. But for some reason it's just on a downward trend. But I guess both those decks are like souped up with removal. I think there's obviously all the Tithe Blades and the cast downs, snuff outs, all that sort of stuff out of the Black White Blade, and then you've got the bolts and chain lightnings out of the Boros Gates. So you've got 2 chain lightnings, 4 bolts. You've got not a lot more removal, but you've got more removal than other white decks, like along with White Weenie and Colgate, but still
not that much more though.
No,
like you've got 2 chain lightnings essentially.
But
because the Boros Gates deck even plays Rafine's Informant and essentially just has the cat that is a reasonable discard.
Yep.
He plays Rafine's Informant and Beta Reunion, but just a cat or I guess extra Squadron Hawks or something. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird one.
Yeah, it's definitely an odd choice, but I guess ultimately clunking the board up is pretty much all you need, I guess. But seems very, very strange overall.
Yeah, I think even the blade decks don't have as much removal as I would have sort of expect. Like they obviously lean very heavy on the Titan Blades. With I think both of them play 4. But then the actual other removals, just like a single cast down and a couple of snuff outs and a fumes. And that's it in the main. Like for a black white deck, that's a lot less removal than we normally see.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind, I guess that the Titan Blade does carry pretty hard with the Glinthawks and the Skyfishers.
Yeah, you effectively have 4 Titan Blades, but you also have like pseudo 12.
It's just reusable.
Yeah, when you reuse it. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. I really do like the take on this Black White Blade deck as well. It's more like Gardens as well. It's not really fancy with like the initiative or anything. It's just here's some random white guys, the Monarch, and then a troll to help my mana generally. Just makes it feel that I don't know. It makes it feel that a little bit more control-y than just the amount of times I would die from playing Goliath Paladin in my Black White Blade deck was just felt bad without Ephemerate.
Yeah, it's one of those that it's sometimes can be hard to defend that well as well. But it is nice that the curve's so low, like due to just like not playing Goliath Paladins. Essentially, you've got 2 Thorns as 4 drops, and that's basically it. Everything else is 1s and 2s, which is really cool.
Other than that, I also really do like the obviously back to back of Turbo Fog It's
Yeah.
definitely not something I expected to see. To be fair, this top 8 isn't exactly what I expected to see. Double Hopeless Nightmare, Black White Blade, and double Kuldotha, double Turbo Fog is definitely not what I expected. But I think Turbo Fog's really well positioned at the moment. I also think this list from Ritual Sinkhole is generally really good. He obviously top 8 last week with it, well, won last week. Really great sideboard strategy too. Like, obviously, as I mentioned last week, it's very like Eternal format-esque. You know, you're boarding one card in, boarding one card out, which is not really Pauper. At the minute, it's always, here's my 6 sideboard cards for one deck. And it just feels clean. Just seems to play
Yeah.
clean as well.
I think as well, like you say, if you're lining up, you want to beat Glitters, you want to beat Kuldotha. Turbo Fog's like a decent place to do that from. And has a lot of game against control as well once you've boarded out all your fogs and stuff.
For sure. I guess obviously next week we're gonna have Turbo Fog mirrors everywhere. That's probably where we're going. But I also think I must try this Black White Blade deck as well, because A, I didn't like the original list of Black White Blade. B, it still stands out to me that Hopeless Nightmare seems really strange with only 4 Skyfishes to pick this back up. So I really want to try it.
Yeah.
I want to see how it plays out, because I don't know if you've seen is it from like Brothers War or maybe even Ixalan? It's like a 1 white 2/2, and that has the core Skyfish ability. It doesn't have flying or anything. It's just like a Avery mechanic, I think it's called. So the body's not that great, obviously, in comparison to Glinthawk, because it doesn't fly. Obviously, costs 1 mana more, but being able to have 8 ways to rebuy Hopeless Nightmare seems more appealing to me, even on a worse body. But
I think that the problem is the body's just basically irrelevant though, isn't it?
yeah,
like it's just never attacking through.
yeah.
Is that a video we are expecting next week? Then is
I wouldn't
on
say
Teasdale MTG Black White Blade.
I wouldn't say next week, but it's definitely one that I'll be trying in the future for sure.
Yeah.
With Avery mechanic in or something. I don't know. Maybe just this straight up this list. I haven't decided yet.
They might even play it for the Northern Pauper Open.
Maybe. Well, I haven't got that far. Yeah. So that's it from me for obviously the Saturday.
Yeah. Sweet challenge. Obviously pretty mixed. Very like a lot of just sort of fringy decks with the double Turbo Fog, the double Black White Blade, and the Boros Gates. I think another main takeaway is Kuldotha is just still really good. There's 3 in the top 10, which is pretty mental. For something that received a ban a month ago or whatever it was, 2 months ago.
Definitely.
Moving on to Sunday. There was 64 players on Sunday the 28th of January, which is slightly lower than we normally see on Sunday. I think it's been tending towards like 70, 80 players. I'm not sure if there's a reason for that. Like sometimes when we see low player counts, it's like something going on, like it's Christmas Day or something. But yeah, slightly lower player count. Still quite an interesting top 8. So first place was Gardens. Second place was Gardens with white sideboard cards. Third place was Jeskai Glitters. Fourth place was White Weenie. Fifth place was Kuldotha Red. Sixth place was Blue Black Terror. Seventh was Blue Black Fair. And 8th was FAMS. And then the 2 near misses. 9th was a second copy of Blue Black Fair. And 10th was a second copy of FAMS. So another very mixed top 8. And Gardens sort of returning after being quiet for a while. I can't remember really when Gardens was last even in the top 4, to be honest. We usually see it sneaking in at 8th. But yeah, definitely a weekend for Gardens. Sure. Also nice to see White Weenie jumping in. Always good to see White Weenie getting there. It's a fairly stock White Weenie list, if I remember correctly, with just a couple minor tweaks. I think it had a recommission in the main and a Palace Sentinels. And again, cutting down on strands, as we spoke about before. It still has the 4 across the 75, but yeah, going down to 3 in the main. Yeah. And double fans.
Yeah. I think, to be fair, the more I think about it, obviously with the way now Daybreak operates with the 5-0s, so obviously they share 5-0s every day of every deck, every 5-0 from each day. Like you really do get to see sort of trends. So I guess if that then sort of impacts people's decisions on challenges, maybe that might be why, because there's a lot of Kuldotha and a lot of Glitters 5-0. But if that then that might be why Strands is on the down low is the only reason I can think of, other than people want something to cut. And I guess Strands is kind of easy to cut down from
It's
4 to 3.
it's really good against Kuldotha though. So surely if you see lots of Kuldotha, you just want your Strand.
Yeah, I don't know, but
It's a weird one.
very, very strange. Other than that, both Mono Black or Gardens Masters, Iab and Nick Norman have done really well generally in the Mono Black space. And both with sort of, I don't want to say interesting lists, but definitely a little bit different. First of all, Nick, please get rid of the Woodland Chasm. Please. Come on. Haunted Mire all the way. There's no reason whatsoever.
For the snow.
Yeah.
Maybe just like to give him Ponza that out to get in a life.
Sure, whatever. Especially with like Tithe and Blade as well. Like you could end up having Tithe and Blade be your win condition and draining them for 1 as you're going round, and you just give them an extra life. But whatever. Other than that, some fairly weird, like not weird choice, but interesting. Fungal Infection making a return from Nick Norman's list, which is quite nice since obviously with Fair kind of appearing here and there. You've obviously got the red decks like with Kuldotha and obviously Voldar and Epicure and all that sort of stuff. And it's also pretty good against Gingerbrute, which is probably the most annoyingest card out of Glitters. Finally, the weird thing that stands out to me that is the 4 Wellsprings, 1 Lembas split. Usually they're on like 3-2 or of one way or the other. So it's interesting that they've just went back to the full 4 of Ica Wellsprings. I guess obviously with this many dispute effects, they just want to draw raw cards. I'm down for that. I don't hate it because I don't really like Lembas to be fair, but still. And the final thing is the 3-1 split of Tithe and Blade and Chainers. Interesting. Yeah. Most lists only run just straight up for Tithe and Blades. Chainers is not needed. So interesting to see why that choice was made. But Iab is the actual master of weird Gardens lists. So first of all, on Pulse, Wilt, and Vampire Sovereign, and also Disfigure, I guess, to an extent, which Disfigure kind of makes sense. It's exactly the same kind of token as Fungal Infection. Really good against the small creatures, especially Reaches, Blast Runners, Ornithopters, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, obviously slightly better against Mono Red with all the X2s.
Yeah.
With the Blast Runners and the Tomb Raiders.
Yes. And also Wilt, great card. I've always been high on Wilt in Gardens, to be fair. I think the card's really strong anyways. So it's nice to see that he's still happy and still on that. And the Pulse, never really been a fan of the Pulse, but again, card's pretty strong. Again, life obviously recur in a lot of you, whatever you want. I am high on Vampire Sovereign. Mainly because the only reason I really like Vampire Sovereign is because it makes me want Avenging Hunter banned even more. Just so Gardens players can just play Vampire Sovereign. Like, this card is, like, I preferred Gardens way before they added the Initiative and Avenging Hunter. And this card is why. This card's just so fun. I just really like playing with a big, dumb 3-4 flyer that's just going to slowly drain them to death. That is how I want to kill people. Yeah. And then, I guess, obviously, we've got to touch on the fact that they're running the 2 Basilicas to facilitate 3 circular protections in the sideboard. 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red. That's it. That's all I got. I don't know why the black one. I'm guessing Crypt Rats in the mirror, but yeah. Black one's an interesting choice.
I guess also just your own Crypt Rats.
I guess.
If you want. I guess the main difference that I sort of noticed between them is the Defile. Obviously, the first list is the Defile list.
Yeah.
With the second, just obviously having that 1 Disfigure instead. But no real 1 mana removal other than that one Disfigure.
No. Very strange. But I think, to be fair, with all the Karoo lands and things like that to facilitate the circle protection, it's kind of less swamps, right? And it's still they're on like what 11,
Yeah. What's this? 10, 11,
12.
12. Seems one less
Yeah,
swamp.
I guess.
But yeah, it's an interesting take. Obviously,
Mm.
the circle protections, especially the blue and the red, are really good. The black one, as you say, is interesting. Like Crip Rats is the main thing that comes to my mind. I guess it would break parity a lot in the mirror, where if you can prevent the damage to you,
Mm.
I guess it just prevents all the damage. Oh no, it sees to you, so you can prevent basically turn off theirs. Like if they want to use it as a wrath, it hits them and not you.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you can make yours only hit them.
Mm.
It's sort of like gaining, but like a load of life.
Yeah, I think it isn't because the mirror generally does come down to like Crip Rats and Troll effectively, so it kind of makes sense, but
Mm.
seems like a strange one. Just draw better.
I think the one thing I picked up on these as well, which is sort of my last comment on them, is Nick Norman's list
Mm.
as a one-of Troublemaker Oof in the sideboard, which is a card from Eldraine that we sort of mentioned as it might be playable at some point.
Mm.
Um, and it's making its debut in a top 8, I think, for the first time.
Yeah, I've sort of seen it. I don't know why people try this card. I'm really not a fan of this compared to the Glamour personally, but yeah, it's fine, sure, but
I
not.
guess it's sort of like a Glamour, but you can get value off like a Wellspring or something, and you can get the benefit of it being a creature, so you can like craft it with your um Tithe Blades, and you can sack it to your Deadly Disputes or Fanatical Offerings or whatever.
I
Um,
guess.
it's yeah, it's sort of I guess a bit less consistent because you have to turn it on with
Mm.
the bargain. Um, but I can't imagine that's much of an issue in Gardens, and you sort of get the body afterwards, which
Mm.
Gardens has a lot of uses for just a random
I think
creature.
to me the main issue is it's sorcery. That's the
Yeah,
reason why I
yeah, yeah,
really
yeah.
dislike it. Like obviously, Garden's sort of playstyle is very much like I'm gonna hold up my mana. If you do nothing, I'll deadly dispute. If you do something, I'll kill whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that really falls flat on itself with that sort of playstyle, which is why I'm not really keen on it. But it is nice to see. Nice that they've split them up. I guess they obviously still run two of the glamours, to one oof, but definitely an interesting one.
Mm.
Other than that, I guess the other thing is Hamuda obviously came third with the Jeskai Glitters deck, and it is looking like Walker's list.
Yeah, with the
Uh,
four range resolve and the and recruits in the main.
And similar sort of sideboard strategy as well with the Sailor Fires, the Tectonic Hazards, and the Red Elemental Blast Dispels. The only thing is, it looks like it's cut numbers to fit in 3 relics, which is pretty nice. Deck looks sweet. If the main deck is probably it's either this one or the Luffy version that I was mentioning earlier, and these are the two that I'm sort of set on. I think the Hawk synth engine is just too strong not to
Mm.
run. Definitely a good one.
Yeah, it definitely just gives you that grinding power, doesn't it? And if that's sort of more your play style, it's definitely
Mm.
a good place to be.
The other thing I've got to mention is both challenges seemed a lot more aggressive
Yeah.
in terms of the top 8, which was very nice to see. Obviously, we got Jeskai Glitters, a White Wing, and a Kuldotha on the Sunday, and then double Kuldotha, and I guess Boris Gates is more mid-range, yes, but it still has aggressive tendencies. It's very White Weenie-ish. But yeah, like a lot more aggressively slanted compared to the mid-range piles that we've been seeing. Um, yeah, and 2 people were brave enough to top 10 with FAMs, I guess. Yeah.
One being GN, was it?
Probably an 8th, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
With he needs to try harder. Like, dude, come on, you can get this. If I cheer you, you've got this. You have got next week. You are going to win this challenge with FAMs. You got this. But I don't know how many times we can talk about his deck. His deck is pretty solid. I like the Miser copies of cards and things like that. Definitely cool to see. Big fan of False Summoning. Big fan of Destroy Evil. Just clearly he's not good enough to get that first. You know, come on, try harder. We got this.
Jesus. Do you want to move on to the shout-outs?
Yeah. So it's kind of, to be fair, it stems in quite nicely. To be fair, so shout out to GN for the top 8. Yeah, nicely done. Obviously, FAMS is a difficult deck to play, not for you, but it is a difficult deck to play in general. So nice to see. Congratulations to Luffy for the win on Saturday as well with Grix Affinity. Shout out to Weber with the 20th place. Obviously, you've got to keep shouting out the PFP. But please, dude, pick a spicier deck here. Blue Black Fair twice in 2 weeks. Are you really a content creator? Like, really? I'm John. Ritual Sinkhole, congrats for the back-to-back top 8. And thanks for the big primer as well in the FAMS Discord on Turbo Fog. I really learned a lot about that deck. Thank you. Never going to use it, but thanks for the info. It was dead good. Good, insightful primer.
I think it's a deck that benefits a lot from a good primer as well. So if
Yeah.
there are people interested in picking Turbo Fog up, I would recommend finding that primer, because it is one that it's very difficult to just pick up and start doing well with.
Yes. Yeah, it gave a lot of like gameplay advice, a lot of like sideboard options as well, and strategies in that matchup. So it's really good because it came about because a lot of people were struggling with matchups, and Ritual Sinkhole turned around and says, I don't know what you're about, these are really good matchups for Turbo Fog. So yeah. Sweet. Guys are
The more you know.
the guy's a god pilot, clearly. And congrats to Walker for the top 16, I guess, with the Jeskai Glitters. Wasn't quite good enough to get there, but still pretty good going. I think it was is kind of the list that we obviously top 8'd, but with a couple of Ornithopters in, I think. Yeah, it was. So cut 2 Ardent Recruits for 2 Ornithopters to kind of go with that split.
Interesting.
And then tried a sort of weirdish sideboard with like Ardent Recruits and Crimson Acolytes and Gorilla Shamans and stuff in the sideboard. So yeah.
Sweet. Still brewing that glitters list.
Oh yes. Would you like to move on to hot takes?
Yeah. So the hot takes from last week. My first one was that we would continue to see more fringe decks appear in top 8s. For example, Elves, Fog, Black White Blade, etc. There was a lot this week. We obviously had the Boros Gates, the 2 Turbo Fogs, and the 2 Black White Blades. There was also the 2 FAMs, which I would say FAMs is pretty fringe.
It's got the best win rate though.
I know, but no one plays it. But no one plays it.
56% win rate.
Yeah, that's just GN top 8 and
Nah,
every
to be
week.
fair, that is just GN, to be fair.
So yeah, a pretty good week for more fringe decks. And hopefully we'll see more.
Hopefully. Mine was another mono-coloured Tron deck will be in the top 32 next week. No one's brewed it yet. There was 4 Tron decks, but they were all mono-red. There was 3 actual mono-reds, which were the Chateau and Floiser list, and then one of them was sort of that list, but ran a Forest Mountain Land and the 7 mana gain 6 with the one from Brothers War, Boulder Branch, Boulder.
Branch
Boulder
prototype
Branch.
guy.
Prototype, that's the mechanic I was looking for. That one. Yeah, which was interesting.
Yeah, I seen that list, but then it ran 4 of every Tron land, so I wasn't interested anymore.
Yeah, come on, it's 3-3-4. Come on, it's how it has to go.
Yeah, it's a shame. Sort of the Tron decks didn't do better this week. I'm not sure where the top one was, but I don't think they were inside of the top 16.
No, I don't think so. I think I remember looking and they weren't too
but yeah,
high.
Hopefully even just the mono red one bounces back, because it's a sweet deck to see.
It is.
My second one for last week was that Colgate would be back in both top 8s. Which just did not happen at all. The best result was 10th. And it really just wasn't played very much. So maybe people are finally bored with it. Yeah, maybe that's why we had less players on the Sunday, because all the Colgate players just didn't turn up. But yeah, it was a Gardens return to the top 8 instead of a Colgate return.
Yeah, it just was nowhere, to be fair. But also something that wasn't really anywhere is I said Terra decks will be the blue deck of choice next week, and Colgate will begin to start a dip. Colgate did start a dip. It dipped a lot harder than I expected, to be fair. But Terra also dipped massively. There was one in the top 8. There was a 13th, and that was on Saturday, and 0 in the top 16 on Sunday. And there wasn't, to be fair, that many pilots. There was 9 and 10, respectively. That's Terra in general. That's blue, blue, red, blue, black. So there's only 19 pilots across the whole weekend, which, to be fair, isn't that many compared to normal.
Yeah.
Not
well, yeah, the obviously the top 8 was the Sunday, the blue black list. But the Saturday, the top 8 just wasn't very blue heavy at all. There's obviously the 2 Turbo Fogs decks, which sort of a blue deck, and Grixis Affinity, so a lot less blue than we have seen recently. The Sunday had a little more with the blue black Fae and the Fams joining the blue black Terra. But yeah, a lot less blue than we've seen in previous weeks, which I think in general is pretty good.
It's nice to show that other non-blue decks can really compete.
Yeah.
Good. Do you want to do hot takes next week?
Yes. So my first one is that we'll return to a more normal or more blue heavy top 8 next week, with the fringe decks dying back a bit before MKM, which is the week after.
Makes sense. They'll pick up Colgate again and start strandsing people and making people cry. I think they'll be red. They'll be red for all the flare and pains because of all the turbo fog.
Yeah.
That's what it'll be.
Pulled off the most played deck with 4 flare and pains in the side.
My next one is I actually think turbo fog will be one of the most represented decks in the top 16 of probably one of the challenges. I think the deck's surprisingly strong, and I think it's fresh enough that people will actually give it a go to try it. They won't enjoy themselves after the end of the tournament, but
Yeah, people jumping on that hype train is definitely a thing. I think Turbo Fog's a weird one though, because it, like we just said before with the primer, it is hard to jump into. Especially on Magic Online. Like obviously it's a lot very clicky, and you take quite a while to win. So if you're not sort of adept Magic Online player, it is a tough one. And especially if you're just picking it up for not playing it for. I've lost my words.
I understand what
you
mean.
if you're just picking it up for the first time,
yeah,
or if you have not had many reps with the deck,
yes.
It is a hard one. But yeah, I could see it. I would more be on the Black White Blade side of things, where Black White Blade will be one of the most represented decks next week. Which is not my hot take, but I should have probably put that. My second one was that Grixis Affinity will be back in both top 8s. After Luffy's win, it's one of those decks that does tend to have a surge after it does well. People just seem to be like, oh, I don't have to play Glitters, I can play this Affinity deck and pick it back up.
Yeah, Grixis Affinity is a strong, to be fair, it's always really been a strong one. Just people just pick it up and put it down and pick it up and put it down. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Strange. Except Luffy. Luffy just plays Affinity decks. Just anything Mirror Enforcer and he is in. My final hot take is that Ponza will make a return. Don't know why. I just got a feeling. There's been a lot of Ponzas in a lot of leagues lately. I don't know why.
Just to punish you.
Yeah, I played 2 leagues with Tron and I've versed 2 Ponzas, one in each league. And then after that, I've also seen quite a lot of Ponza in general. Like in one league, I seen a Jund, a blue-green a rug. A blue-green, a rug, and a red-green in one league.
They're all just queuing into you. They're not actually playing in the league. They're just waiting until you queue and then they're queuing up.
Must be, but Ponza must be good. I don't know.
Yeah, it's sort of been gone for a while. But I think it's just not really got any good matchups at the moment.
No.
But yeah, it'd be interesting if it comes back. Obviously, it has been gone for a long time now.
Yeah, it must not be good because obviously Shatron was the Ponza player and he's playing Mono and Tron.
I think my thing for Ponza is I think it'll surge back when MKM comes out and they put 4 of that green card in the sideboard.
Yeah, they'll try and Ponza people.
Yeah,
So they'll
yeah.
have 4 Deglammers, 4 Pick the Poison, and then the natural obsolescence will just go.
And then just hope to queue
Yeah,
into
that's
Affinity
it.
and glitters all the time.
I've got you. That's the game plan. Anything else?
No, that's it from me.
So, guys, thank you all for listening. If you have enjoyed the podcast, please do not forget to share it with your friends, your local Pauper community, and your something?
Builder.
Or Tyler. Anything. Play it on their radio, on their Makita radio while they're fitting your bathroom. Put it in there and then play it. That's what you need.
I wish there was a builder fit me bathroom. I have to do it myself.
Anyways, guys, do not forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification button so you do not miss an upload. And that is all from us at Casting Commons. Until next time, and don't forget to stay hydrated. Peace!
Bye.